I used to think people exaggerated when they talked about ordinary situations turning dangerous. You hear stories online where somebody says their whole life changed because they happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it always sounds dramatic. A year ago, I would have rolled my eyes at that. I would have said that bad things don't just happen during everyday errands. But after what happened to me at my local supermarket, I understand how quickly normal life can spiral into something you never forget. This happened last November. I'd just gotten off work on a Thursday evening. Nothing special about the day. I worked in an insurance office and my routine was painfully predictable. I'd leave work around 6, stop at the same supermarket 10 minutes from my apartment, grab dinner and groceries for the week, then head home. That night, the parking lot was unusually crowded. I remember thinking it was strange because it wasn't a holiday or anything. I grabbed a shopping cart and walked inside. About 5 minutes later, while I was in the produce section, I heard shouting. At first, I ignored it. Then, I heard something crash. Everybody nearby turned to look. A man in his 40s wearing a gray jacket was screaming at another guy who looked maybe 25. The younger guy worked there. I could tell because he was wearing the store's apron. The older man was furious. "I've been standing there for 20 minutes, he yelled. The employee looked terrified. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see you." "You didn't see me? Are you kidding me?" People were starting to gather around. I hate confrontations, but I also hate seeing somebody get screamed at for no reason. The employee looked like he was on the verge of tears. The older man suddenly shoved a display of canned vegetables, sending cans rolling everywhere. At that point, I stepped in. I didn't think. I just walked over. "Hey," I said, "calm down. It's not worth this." The man turned toward me. I instantly regretted speaking. He had these cold eyes, completely emotionless except for the anger. "This doesn't concern you," he said. "I know, but you're making a scene." He stared at me for several seconds. The employee quietly slipped away. The man looked back at me. "You think you're helping?" I shrugged. "I'm just saying everybody's had a long day." For a second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It looked fake. Then he nodded. "You're right." He turned around and walked away. Everybody seemed relieved. A manager came over and thanked me. I felt awkward because I hadn't really done anything. I grabbed my groceries and forgot about it, or at least I tried to. As I checked out, I noticed the man again. He was standing near the entrance, watching me. I looked away immediately. When I glanced back a few seconds later, he was still staring. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but not scared. People are weird. I paid for my groceries and left. As I walked through the parking lot, I noticed the same gray jacket. The man was loading groceries into his trunk. I didn't think much of it. I got into my car and drove home. About halfway there, I looked in my rearview mirror. A dark SUV was behind me. Again, nothing unusual. Then I made a right turn. The SUV made the same turn, then another. The SUV followed. A weird feeling settled into my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. I drove around another block. Still there. At this point, I started paying attention. I changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. I slowed down. It slowed down. I remember my hands tightening on the steering wheel. I looked again. I couldn't see the driver. The windows were too dark. I decided not to go home. Instead, I pulled into a gas station. The SUV drove right past me. I actually laughed at myself. I felt stupid. I got gas, bought a drink, and sat in my car for a few minutes. Then I headed home. When I reached my apartment complex, I forgot about the whole thing until I got out of my car. A dark SUV was parked across the street. My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if it was the same one, but it looked identical. The engine was running. I stood there staring at it. Then the SUV slowly drove away. I didn't sleep very well that night. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overthinking everything. The following day after work, I stopped at the same supermarket. I know that sounds stupid, but it's part of my routine. As I walked inside, I saw the young employee from the argument. He recognized me. "Hey," he said, "thanks again for yesterday." "No problem." He looked nervous. "That guy was insane." "You know him?" The employee shook his head. "He comes in here all the time." "What happened?" He asked one of our cashiers where the manager was. Then he started screaming for no reason. I frowned. That's weird. The employee looked around. Then he lowered his voice. He asked about you. I actually laughed. What? After you left, he came back in and asked who you were. The smile disappeared from my face. What did you tell him? Nothing. I didn't know you. I felt a chill. You're kidding. He shook his head. He was asking what kind of car you drove too. I suddenly didn't feel like shopping anymore. I grabbed a few things and left. As I stepped outside, I froze. The dark SUV was parked at the far end of the lot. I couldn't see inside. I got into my car immediately. As I backed out, the SUV started moving. I drove away. It followed. At this point, there was no doubt. I turned down random streets. The SUV stayed behind me. I remember my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I called my brother. He answered immediately. Dude, I think someone's following me. What? I explained everything. Drive to the police station. The nearest one was 15 minutes away. I started heading there. The SUV remained behind me the entire time. Then, about 3 minutes away from the station, it suddenly turned off onto another road. I sat there shaking. I still don't know why I didn't go to the police anyway. I guess because I had no proof. I went home. That night I checked my windows 3 times. The next morning was Saturday. Around 10, somebody knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I opened the door. A supermarket receipt lay on the floor. I picked it up. My blood went cold. It was my receipt, the one from Thursday night, the exact same items, the exact same time. I dropped it. Somebody had taken it out of the trash, or somehow gotten it from the store. I looked down the hallway. Nobody. I immediately called the police. An officer came out and took a report. He basically said there wasn't much they could do. I spent the rest of the day terrified. That night I stayed at my brother's house. Sunday evening I returned to my apartment. Everything seemed normal until I checked my mailbox. Inside was a folded piece of paper. No envelope. Just one sentence. You like helping strangers. I couldn't breathe. I called the police again. This time they took it more seriously. An officer asked if I had any enemies. I laughed. I work in insurance. I don't have enemies. I told them about the man at the supermarket. They said they'd look into it. Monday morning I got another call. It was the young employee. I had apparently given him my number when I left on Friday because he looked nervous and wanted to tell me if the guy came back. I barely remembered doing it. His voice was shaking. He's here. What? The guy. I sat up in bed. Call the police. He keeps asking where you are. I could hear commotion in the background. Then the line went dead. I called him back. No answer. I called the supermarket. A manager answered. I explained who I was. There was silence. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. The employee had quit. 10 minutes earlier, he'd walked out. Nobody knew where he went. I tried calling him all day. Nothing. That evening, I drove home from work. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed something sitting in front of my door. A grocery bag. I approached slowly. Inside were all the items from my receipt. Every single one. Milk, bread, frozen pizza, everything. At the bottom was another note. I don't forget people who stand up for me. I just stood there, completely confused. The message didn't sound threatening. It sounded grateful. I called the police again. They arrived within 20 minutes. One of the officers read the note twice. Then he looked at me. I don't think this guy wants to hurt you. I wasn't convinced. The next day, I finally got an answer. The young employee called me. He sounded exhausted. You're not going to believe this. He explained that after I left the store Friday, he had looked up the man's name from an old incident report. Apparently, the guy had a history of mental illness. A few years earlier, he'd stopped an armed robbery at a convenience store. Nobody believed his story afterward because he became obsessed with the people involved. He'd follow them, leave gifts, and watch their houses. Not because he wanted to hurt them, because he believed they were connected by a shared experience. The employee paused. After you stepped in and defended me, I think he decided you were one of those people. I didn't know what to say. A few days later, the police identified him. They spoke to him and issued a warning. I never heard from him again. But the story doesn't end there. About 2 months later, I went back to the supermarket. I was in the checkout line when I noticed something hanging on the employee bulletin board behind customer service, a newspaper clipping. I walked over. The headline read, "Local man prevents robbery." There was a photo. It was him, the man in the gray jacket. I asked the manager about it. She sighed. "He used to shop here all the time. Nice guy, actually. Something happened to him after that incident." I stared at the picture. He looked completely normal, just an ordinary man smiling at the camera. Driving home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How one random decision had turned into weeks of fear. How stepping into an argument over spilled cans and a rude customer somehow made me the center of a stranger's obsession. The craziest part is that if I had arrived at the store 5 minutes later, none of it would have happened. I would have bought my groceries and gone home. Instead, one ordinary trip to the supermarket became the most unsettling experience of my life. That's why whenever people say normal situations can become dangerous in an instant, I don't laugh anymore. Because sometimes horror doesn't come from haunted houses or monsters. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as trying to be a peacemaker in the middle of a grocery store. I never thought a trip to the supermarket could end with me sitting in a police station at 3 in the morning trying to explain why I thought a complete stranger wanted me dead. Even now, almost 2 years later, I still avoid that store. The whole thing started because I made the mistake of getting involved in somebody else's argument. I guess that's the part that bothers me the most. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was just trying to help. It was a Tuesday night in early September. I'd just gotten off work and needed groceries for the week. My routine was always the same. I'd stop at the supermarket a few miles from my apartment, buy whatever I needed, and head home. I remember being in a good mood that night because I had the next day off. The store wasn't very busy. There were maybe 15 or 20 people inside. I grabbed a basket and headed toward the frozen food aisle. That's when I heard yelling near customer service. At first, I ignored it. Then somebody shouted, "Don't touch me!" Everyone turned to look. A man who looked to be in his late 50s was arguing with another customer, a younger guy in his 30s wearing a baseball cap. The older man looked furious. His face was bright red. "You hit my card on purpose," he yelled. "I barely touched it," the younger guy said. "You're lying." The older man suddenly shoved him. The younger guy stumbled backward and knocked over a display of candy bars. A cashier immediately called for the manager. People started backing away. I hate public confrontations. Most people do, but I also hate seeing things escalate when they don't have to. So I stepped in. I walked over and raised my hands. "Hey guys, calm down. It's not worth fighting over a shopping cart." The younger guy looked embarrassed. "Tell him that." The older man turned and stared at me. "Mind your own business." "I am. You're making it everyone's business." A few people actually laughed at that. The older man's face somehow got even redder. For a second I thought he might swing at me. Instead, he took a step back and looked at me for several seconds. Then he nodded. "You're right," he said quietly. He picked up his basket and walked away. The younger guy sighed with relief. A manager came over and thanked me. Everybody went back to shopping. It seemed over. I wish it had been. About 20 minutes later, I was standing in line to check out when I noticed the older man again. He wasn't buying anything. He was standing by the exit staring directly at me. I looked away. When I glanced back, he was still watching me. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but not scared. There are weird people everywhere. I paid for my groceries and left. As I loaded the bags into my trunk, I noticed a blue sedan parked a few spaces away. The older man was sitting inside it. He wasn't looking at his phone or starting the engine. He was just sitting there, looking at me. I drove home and forgot about it. The next morning, I woke up around 9. Since I had the day off, I planned on doing absolutely nothing. Around 11, there was a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I opened the door and found a shopping receipt on the ground. It wasn't mine. It belonged to the older man. I only knew that because his credit card receipt was attached to it, and I recognized his name from hearing the manager call him Mr. Parker during the argument. I stood there confused. Then I noticed something written on the back. "Thank you for helping." That was it. No signature, no explanation. I figured he must have somehow found my apartment and left the note. Weird, but maybe harmless. Then I realized something. I had never told him my name. I had never told anyone in the store where I lived. The receipt suddenly felt a lot heavier in my hand. I locked my door and tried not to think about it. 2 days later, I went back to the same supermarket. I know that sounds stupid, but it was the closest store to my apartment. As soon as I walked inside, I saw the younger guy from the argument. Apparently, he worked there and had just gotten off his shift that night. He recognized me immediately. "Hey, peacekeeper," he said jokingly. I laughed, then I asked him something that had been bothering me. "Did you tell that older guy anything about me?" The smile disappeared from his face. "No. Why?" I explained about the note. He looked genuinely unsettled. "That's weird." Then he paused. "Actually, after you left that night, he asked the manager if she knew who you were." "What did she say?" "Nothing. She didn't know either." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I grabbed a few things and left. As I walked to my car, I froze. The blue sedan was parked directly beside mine. Empty. I looked around the parking lot. No sign of the older man. I got into my car and locked the doors. That's when somebody knocked on my window. I nearly screamed. It was him. He was standing beside my car, smiling. I rolled the window down a few inches. "Can I help you?" He smiled wider. "I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" "Nobody ever steps in anymore. You did." I nodded awkwardly. "No problem." He didn't move. "You reminded me of my son." I didn't know what to say to that. Then he asked, "Do you live alone?" Every alarm in my head went off. I lied immediately. "No, I have roommates." He looked disappointed for some reason. Then he smiled again. "That's good." I drove away without another word. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about him felt wrong. The next evening I was making dinner when I looked out my kitchen window and saw a blue sedan parked across the street. My stomach dropped. I couldn't see who was inside because it was getting dark, but I had a feeling. About an hour later, the car drove away. The next morning, I found another note under my windshield wiper. "You should be more careful. You leave your curtains open." I called the police immediately. An officer came by and took a report. Unfortunately, I had no proof that the older man left the note. They told me to call if I saw him again. 2 days later, I did. I was leaving work when I spotted the blue sedan parked across from my office building. The older man was sitting inside staring at the entrance. I called the police from my car. By the time an officer arrived, the sedan was gone. I started getting paranoid after that. Every blue car looked suspicious. Every knock at my door made my heart race. Then, things got worse. A week later, I came home and found a grocery bag sitting outside my apartment. Inside was bread, milk, and cereal, the exact things I'd bought the night we met. There was another note. I remember what people need. I didn't sleep at all that night. The police finally tracked him down after I gave them his license plate number. What they told me, honestly, made the whole thing even creepier. The man had lost his son 6 years earlier in a car accident. Ever since then, he'd developed an obsession with strangers who reminded him of him. He'd follow them, watch them, and leave gifts for them. He never physically hurt anyone, but he'd become convinced they needed his protection. The officer told me I wasn't his first victim. I remember sitting there completely stunned. The officer looked at me and said something I'll never forget. To him, "You're not a stranger. You're a replacement." They issued a restraining order and warned him to stay away from me. I never saw him again. At least I don't think I did. About 6 months later, I was shopping at a completely different supermarket across town. As I pushed my cart down the cereal aisle, I noticed an older man at the end of the aisle wearing a baseball cap. He looked up and smiled at me. For one horrible second, I thought it was him. My heart nearly stopped. It wasn't, just some random guy. But I abandoned my cart and left anyway. That's the thing about experiences like this. They don't end when the person disappears. They stay with you. To this day, whenever I see someone arguing in public, I keep walking. Maybe that sounds selfish. Maybe it is. But I learned something that night. Sometimes you can do one small, decent thing for a complete stranger and accidentally become the center of their world. And that's a terrifying feeling. I still can't go into a supermarket late at night without feeling that same tight pressure in my chest, like something is watching me from the end of the aisle. It's been almost a year, and I've told myself 100 times it was probably just a series of coincidences, bad timing, my imagination running overtime after a long shift. But deep down, I know what I saw, and more importantly, I know what I heard. And if you were in that store with me that night, I think you'd understand why I haven't been able to forget a single second of it. It started on a Friday, around 10:40 p.m. I remember the exact time because I had checked my phone while sitting in my car, debating whether I even wanted to go inside. I had just finished a double shift. I was exhausted, hungry, and honestly just wanted to grab a few things and get home. The supermarket near me, a big suburban chain store, one of those places that stays open late with self-checkout lanes glowing like a row of empty eyes, was mostly empty at that hour. Usually it's just a couple of employees stocking shelves, maybe one or two customers drifting around. Nothing unusual. That night should have been like any other night. I parked, grabbed my reusable bag from the passenger seat, and walked in through those automatic sliding doors that always feel too slow, like they're deciding whether or not to let you in. The moment I stepped inside, something felt off. Not in a dramatic way, not like horror movie music starts playing or anything like that. It was quieter than usual. Even the hum of the refrigerator sounded distant, muffled. I remember noticing the self-checkout area first because the bright white light there always stands out. But that night, one of the sections looked disturbed, like someone had been rushing through it. A display of bottled water had been completely knocked over. Cases were torn open, bottles scattered across the polished tile floor, rolling slightly whenever the air conditioning kicked in. A shopping cart sat sideways near it, like it had been abandoned mid-turn. I remember thinking maybe some kid had knocked it over, or maybe an employee dropped something and hadn't cleaned it up yet. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just walked past it, heading toward the aisles. The store felt unusually empty. I didn't see a single employee. No cashier at the front, no one restocking, even the usual self-checkout attendant station was empty. The screens were still on, glowing blue and white, each one waiting for a customer that wasn't there. I grabbed a basket and started moving through the aisles. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and I remember how my footsteps echoed more than they should have. Every small sound felt exaggerated, like the store was amplifying it back at me. I picked up a few things, bread, some snacks, a drink, but the whole time I kept feeling like I was being watched from somewhere deeper in the store. Not directly, not like someone standing behind me, but like something was aware I was there. I told myself it was just fatigue messing with my head. Then I heard the first sound. It was subtle at first, almost like a cart rolling somewhere far away. Metal wheels on tile. I stopped walking and listened. It stopped too. I waited a few seconds, then continued. And then it started again, closer this time. I turned down the aisle slowly, expecting maybe to see an employee or another late-night shopper, but there was nothing. Just shelves and products and that weird, sterile quiet. I should have left at that point. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't. I kept going toward the self-checkout area to finish quickly. That's when I noticed something else had changed. One of the checkout screens was flickering. Not broken, just unstable. Like someone was actively using it, but no one was there. I remember stepping closer and seeing the interface switching between idle and scanning mode by itself. My first thought was glitchy software. These machines always mess up. But then I heard a beep, like someone had scanned an item. I froze. I looked around the entire self-checkout zone. Empty, no movement, no people. Just the soft hum of electronics. Then another beep, and another. Slow, deliberate, like items being scanned one at a time. I backed up slightly, telling myself I was done, I was leaving. I'd just walk out and forget this whole thing. But then I saw it. One of the abandoned shopping carts near the toppled water display moved. Not rolled quickly, not pushed hard. Just shifted slightly, like someone had grabbed it and let go. My stomach dropped. I called out, asking if anyone was there. My voice echoed too loudly. No answer. Then, all at once, every self-checkout screen in the area turned on brighter, not just flickering anymore, fully active, each one displaying a transaction screen, each one showing items being scanned. but there was nothing on the belts. No hands, no customers, just automated beeping increasing in speed like the machines were racing through invisible groceries. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned fast. Nothing there. But the sound didn't stop. It shifted direction, moving around me like someone circling the entire checkout area without ever stepping into view. I backed away toward the exit, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I smelled something faintly metallic, like coins or old batteries. The lights above the water display flickered once, twice, then one of the water bottles rolled across the floor on its own. I don't mean it was pushed in a way I didn't see. I mean it just started moving. Slow at first, then faster, like it had been nudged by something invisible. I ran. I didn't even try to be calm. I dropped my basket and just sprinted toward the front entrance. But as I got there, I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The automatic doors weren't opening. I stood in front of them, waving my hand, stepping closer, expecting the sensor to activate. Nothing. Behind me, the beeping from the self-checkouts got louder, faster, more chaotic now, like multiple machines were scanning at once. I turned around slowly. The entire self-checkout section was lit up, every screen, every machine, all active, and now, I swear, I could hear something else mixed in with the beeps, breathing, not mine, not human in a normal sense. It sounded close to the microphones on the machines, like it was coming through them. I backed away from the doors and tried the side exit. Locked. Of course it was locked. I started banging on it, yelling for help, but the store felt completely sealed off from the outside world. The lights dimmed slightly, and in that dimming I saw something that made my entire body go cold. The shopping cart near the water display wasn't empty anymore. Something was standing behind it, not fully visible. Just a distortion in the air, like heat rising off pavement, but shaped vaguely like a person. And it was facing me. I couldn't move. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe seconds, maybe longer. Then every self-checkout machine simultaneously printed receipts. Long ones, continuous, paper spilling onto the floor like strips of evidence, and every single one of them had the same word printed repeatedly at the bottom: checkout complete. The lights went out all at once. Complete darkness. Then the emergency lights kicked in, dim and red. When they did, the figure was gone. The doors were suddenly unlocked. I didn't question it. I ran out and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove straight home without looking back. The next morning, I told myself I was going to report it, maybe ask the store what happened. But when I drove past the supermarket in daylight, everything looked normal. The water display was perfectly intact. The carts were lined up. The self-checkout area looked clean, functional, ordinary. No signs of anything from the night before. I went inside briefly, and an employee told me they hadn't had any incidents, no system errors, nothing unusual. That's when I realized something that still bothers me. Either I experienced something that no one else in that store ever notices, or whatever was there only appears when the store is empty enough to notice it back. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm in my apartment and I hear the faint sound of a checkout beep that isn't coming from anywhere in my home, I wonder if whatever I left behind that night ever actually finished its checkout. I used to work the late shift at a printing company, so grocery shopping at night became part of my routine. Most evenings I'd get off around 10, stop at the same 24-hour supermarket on my way home, grab something for dinner, and leave. I never thought twice about it. It was one of those boring habits you do without even thinking. Looking back, that's probably why what happened bothered me so much. The entire thing started during one of the most ordinary nights imaginable. It was a Wednesday in late October. I'd had a long day and just wanted to get home. I walked into the supermarket a little after 10:30 and immediately heard someone yelling near the front registers. At first, I ignored it. Then I heard a shopping cart slam into something. Everyone in line turned around. A man in his 40s wearing a dark green jacket was screaming at a teenage cashier. The kid couldn't have been older than 17. "I said I gave you a 50, the man shouted. The cashier looked terrified. "Sir, you handed me a 20. "Are you calling me a liar?" A manager was already on the way over, but the guy wasn't calming down. He slammed his hand on the counter hard enough to make the cashier jump. I don't know why I got involved. Maybe because the kid looked scared. Maybe because everyone else was just standing there. I stepped out of line and walked over. "Hey man," I said, "take it easy. He's just doing his job." The guy slowly turned toward me. "You got something to say?" "I'm saying screaming at a teenager over $20 isn't worth it." For a second, I thought he was going to punch me. Instead, he stared at me with this weird expression, then he smiled. "You know what? You're right." He looked back at the cashier. "Forget it." Then he grabbed his groceries and walked out of the store. The manager thanked me, and the cashier looked relieved. Everybody went back to shopping like nothing had happened. I paid for my groceries and left. As I was putting bags into my trunk, I noticed the man in the green jacket standing beside his car about 6 spaces away. He wasn't loading groceries, he was just standing there looking at me. I nodded awkwardly and got into my car. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw his headlights come on behind me. I didn't think much of it. We were probably heading in the same direction. About 5 minutes later, I made a turn toward my apartment complex. He made the same turn. Then another. He followed again. A strange feeling settled into my stomach. I decided not to go home. Instead, I pulled into a fast food restaurant parking lot. The man drove right past me. I laughed at myself. I felt stupid for even thinking I was being followed. I went home and forgot about it. The next evening, I stopped at the same supermarket again. As soon as I walked in, the cashier from the night before recognized me. "Hey," he said, "thanks again for yesterday." "No problem." He hesitated. "That guy came back." I frowned. "The one from last night?" He nodded. "He was asking about you." My stomach tightened. "About me?" "He wanted to know if you worked here." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I don't know anything about you." I forced a laugh. "That's weird." The cashier didn't laugh. He seemed intense. I grabbed a few things and left much quicker than I planned to. As I walked through the parking lot, I saw a dark sedan parked near my car. The man from the night before was sitting inside it. The engine was running. I immediately got into my car and locked the doors. He never got out. He just watched me leave. This time I knew I wasn't imagining things. I drove home and kept checking my mirrors the entire way. Fortunately, he didn't follow me. Or at least I didn't think he did. Around midnight, I took my trash outside to the apartment dumpster. As I walked back toward my building, I noticed a car parked across the street. A dark sedan. The engine was off. I couldn't see inside because it was too dark. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds. Then the headlights suddenly came on. The car slowly drove away. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, there was a grocery bag sitting outside my apartment door. I looked around the hallway. Nobody. Inside the bag was a frozen pizza and a bottle of soda, exactly what I'd bought at the supermarket the night before. There was also a note. "Good people deserve good things." I felt sick. I called the police. An officer came out and took a report, but there wasn't much they could do. There had been no threats, no crime, just a strange gift. The officer told me to call if I saw the man again. 2 nights later, I did. I was back at the supermarket when I noticed him standing near the dairy section. He smiled when he saw me. Then he started walking toward me. I abandoned my cart and headed for the front of the store. He followed. "Hey," he called, "I just want to talk." I ignored him. "You don't remember me, do you?" That made me stop. I turned around. "What?" He smiled again. "I knew you wouldn't." Then he walked away. I stood there completely confused. I'd never seen this guy before in my life. Or at least, I thought I hadn't. That night, I got another note under my windshield wiper. "You helped me once. I won't forget it again." I read it 3 times. I had no idea what it meant. The next day, the police called me. They'd finally identified the man through the supermarket's security footage. An officer asked me to come down to the station. When I got there, he showed me a photo. It was definitely the same guy. Then he asked me if I had ever worked at a gas station about 6 years earlier. I actually laughed because I had. It had been my college job. The officer nodded. Then he explained everything. Apparently, 6 years earlier, the man had been having some kind of mental breakdown at that gas station. According to him, Another customer had stepped in and calmed him down before things got out of hand. He had become obsessed with finding that person again because he believed that stranger had saved his life. I frowned. Okay, what does that have to do with me? The officer slid another photo across the desk. It was an old security image from the gas station. My stomach dropped. The customer who had intervened was me. I had completely forgotten about it. The whole incident had lasted maybe 30 seconds and happened years earlier. But apparently he hadn't forgotten. He'd recognized me the moment I stepped into the argument at the supermarket. In his mind, it wasn't a coincidence. It was fate. The officer looked uncomfortable. The man has a history of becoming attached to people who show him kindness. I felt sick. So he's been following me because of something I don't even remember doing. The officer nodded. Pretty much. They located him later that evening and issued a restraining order. I never saw him again. But the thing that still bothers me is how normal everything seemed. I walked into a supermarket expecting to buy groceries. I saw a guy yelling at a cashier and tried to help. That's it. That's all I did. I had no idea that I had crossed paths with the same person years earlier, or that one forgotten act of kindness had stayed with him all that time. Sometimes I think about how easily I could have avoided all of it. If I'd gone to a different store that night or gotten off work 10 minutes later, none of this would have happened. Instead, one completely ordinary grocery run turned into weeks of looking over my shoulder every time I left my apartment. That's why I never assume everyday routines are harmless anymore. Because sometimes horror doesn't begin with a dark alley or an abandoned house. Sometimes it starts under fluorescent lights in the frozen food aisle while you're trying to buy dinner.